Welcome to Joe College Radio. I'm Miles King, joined by my co-host, the fantastic Jordan Linderman. How are you doing today, Jordan?
I'm doing great. I feel fantastic right now, to be honest. That's a great word to use because we're looking on to next week, leaving this last week behind with the big Arkansas loss. And I'm ready for the bye week. I hope that we cover the spread, but we'll get to that. Don't worry. I know you guys are worried about that, so yeah, I'm ready to get started.
Yeah, that is definitely good news for the Hogs. They get a week off after this last weekend. Let's talk about our first game of the week. It's homecoming in Stillwater, America's greatest homecoming, as it's been dubbed, and the West Virginia Mountaineers are coming in to town to play the Oklahoma State Cowboys. The West Virginia ranked in the top 10 now, undefeated, looking like they're potentially the best team in the Big 12. With impressive back-to-back wins over Texas Tech and TCU. It's going to be a real struggle for OSU to get out of this game with a victory, I think.
Definitely. And having it be the homecoming game, normally you have a weak team that you play against for your homecoming game, but Arkansas had Ole Miss, and they were able to pull out the victory, and that was a game that a lot of people didn't think we would win. So Oklahoma State's in a very similar position. And West Virginia, like you said, they're a great team. I think they're a little bit underrated. They should be above Baylor, in my opinion, but I digress on that point. I will say Oklahoma State's offense has been performing very well pretty much all season, and as Justice Hill's coming along, it looks like if they continue to improve, they might get to the level that Texas Tech have been playing out on offense. And, of course, with them having a better defense, they can get some stops here and there. This could be a very dangerous team as you go into November and you start playing against some more challenging, or some of the middle of the pack teams, and then of course your challenging opponent in Oklahoma at the end of the year. But this is a game that Oklahoma State's built for. West Virginia's also built for, with two teams that like to sling it around. The defenses are used to running all over the field, so. It'll just be who's better at the air raid.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a winnable game. But like you said, Justice Hill, who is quickly becoming a star, he'll need to rush for over 100 yards, I'd say. Rudolph, he'll have to have a great game. James Washington only had one catch against Kansas. If he has a similar performance against West Virginia, I think it's safe to say that we're doomed, as he's arguably our best offensive weapon. But like you said, both teams built on the air raid concept. West Virginia doesn't have an incredibly potent offense. Skylar Howard, decent quarterback, not great. If OSU can get a rush on him, put some pressure on with their deep defensive line, maybe they can cause some problems, because if he's allowed to even though he's just a decent quarterback, if he's allowed to sit back and pick off the OSU secondary, it's going to be a long afternoon for the Pokes. But I think we can get it done. Will we get it done? I don't know. We'll definitely have to show up earlier and with more intensity than we have been the last couple of weeks against Iowa State and Kansas. Moving out to the West Coast, we have a big game in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 North leaders versus the Pac-12 South leaders, Washington at Utah. Washington has looked utterly dominant in every game so far, winning by large margins. It doesn't look like anybody can stop them. But it's fair to raise the point that they may not have played anybody with the quality of Utah yet. How do you see this one shaking out?
I think they've played plenty of teams with the quality of Utah. I am not a fan of Utah at all. I think they're vastly overrated. Their only convincing win coming against Southern Utah, and then their next most convincing win coming against an Arizona team who is playing their fourth-string quarterback, 17-year-old Khalil Tate. And so Washington's they're going to destroy Utah. It's not even going to be close. It's probably going to look a lot like the Washington-Oregon game, where they just wiped the floor with the Ducks. I don't think Utah stands a chance. If they want to fight, and I'll give them the scenario that they'll have to create if they want to have a fighting chance, they'll have to have at least a +3 turnover differential, at least. And then they're going to have to stop the running game. so that they force Jake Browning into pure passing situations because while he is a Heisman contender, he doesn't do a great job whenever everyone knows he's going to throw the ball. He's got a great balance on offense. Chris Peterson's created that balance very well. So if you take away the running game, it'll make it a lot more difficult on him. But I don't see any way that Utah pulls this one out at home.
I'm gonna not so fast, my friend. But I do think Washington is the better team. While the Southern Utah Thunderbirds are no joke, that's a quality win by Utah. But you're right. They have played some close games. While there is a certain quality that you need to win those close games consistently. If they were a top team, you would think they'd be winning those by a wider margin. If I had to choose, I'd edge with Washington, but I think Utah will give them a game. I think playing in Utah at that stadium, they're going to be fired up. They're going to be ready for a big game. College game day will be there. The Utes are going to be up for this game.
Well, this reminds me a lot of the Tennessee Volunteer squad that's been fielded this year. And they come away with close wins, but once they play the big boys, they're a totally different squad. And it'll be similar to that Bama-Tennessee game. It'll be similar to the Washington-Oregon game. And Utah is not going to have a shot.
All right, well, let's move on to another game in Big 12 country. This could be a huge game for Charlie Strong. Could be the win that puts Texas back on track potentially, or the final nail in his coffin, because it's hard to see him coming back from a loss in this game against Baylor. But Baylor travels down to Austin, Texas to face Charlie Strong and the Texas Longhorns. Baylor, of course, undefeated right now. They played a cupcake soft non-conference schedule. Haven't really gotten to the big boys of the league. They were lucky to escape against Oklahoma State in their own stadium. Do you see Texas having a chance against them?
Texas definitely has a chance against them. In Austin, they always have a shot. And this is a team that's played a lot of good opponents, a lot of good Division I talent. And like you said, Baylor has played cupcake soft teams other than Oklahoma State, as you said. And they shouldn't have had that victory. And so I think Texas has a great shot to win this game. I don't know that I would give them the edge, but get a turnover or two, a couple of fourth down conversions, maybe an onside kick, 8 safeties, I don't know, something. As long as they win the turnover battle and they're consistent on third down, similar to how Texas Tech was this past week, which went 20 for 25 on third down, by the way. As long as they're consistent on third down, you don't have to be excellent like Texas Tech was, but consistent, I think they give themselves a good shot, and they're going to be able to steal one and give Baylor a little bit of a reality check as they hit the meat of their schedule.
Yeah, while Texas certainly does have a lot of talent, I don't see this game being close whatsoever. I think it's going to be a blowout. Texas went up to Manhattan, Kansas this week. Were defeated by Bill Snyder and the Wildcats. And if you're Texas, you've got to be winning those types of games against the K-States, Iowa States, Kansas of the world. You can't be losing those. It doesn't bode well for this week. I think Charlie Strong is firmly on his way out. In my opinion, there's no saving his job at this point. Even if he beats Baylor, which I highly doubt will happen, I don't see it. Don't see him keeping his job. Baylor is just going to be too fast on the outside. They still have some of those athletes from the Art Briles era. Their program hasn't been totally deserted like it will be in a year or two. So the Baylor still has some remnants of the quality of Art Briles, which will be enough to beat Texas this week. Now a game in Big Ten country that is the surprisingly undefeated Nebraska Cornhuskers facing the Wisconsin Badgers in Madison, Wisconsin. This Nebraska team is really flying under the radar so far. Nobody's really taking them too seriously. And Wisconsin, of course, has played Michigan and Ohio State extremely close, narrowly losing both games. Do you see them taking care of the Cornhuskers, though?
I think they will. Like you said, Nebraska's flying under the radar, and it's understandable because they haven't played a tough schedule. They've played a Northwestern team that's looking a lot stronger than they were at the beginning of the season. A Wyoming that looks really good as they're 3-0 in the WAC, and then Oregon, who fell off the map completely. But other than those teams, they really haven't gotten to the meat of their Big Ten schedule, and they don't have a lot of tough games this year. They don't have to play Michigan. They don't have to play a lot of those top teams. They do have Ohio State in addition to Wisconsin, but I think Corey Clement gets back on track after this last week. He wasn't as good as he should have been. He's been a lot better throughout the year, and he had a little bit of an off game, but I think Alex Hornibrook and Corey Clement will come together, and they'll be able to provide a balance on the offensive side, and the defense will continue to be stout, led by TJ Watt. I think they'll be able to pull out a victory at home against a currently undefeated Nebraska Cornhuskers team.
Yeah, like you said, they haven't really played a tough schedule so far this year. They struggled last week against Purdue. They actually were trailing at halftime to the Boilermakers, and Purdue, of course, is awful and has no respect. They did, give credit to Nebraska. They did come out and get the win at the end, 27-14, I believe the final score was, but not a great look going in against a tough Wisconsin team. I'd have to side with you. I think Wisconsin will win this. They've played the two dominant teams of the Big Ten pretty close, but you never know. Maybe Nebraska surprises everybody, has a breakout game, and shocks the country.
Yeah, I guess you can't ever count Tommy Armstrong out. He's been inconsistent for the most part in his previous seasons, but he's really putting it together so far this year against a somewhat run-of-the-mill competition.
Well, we will see how that plays out this weekend. Moving to the ACC, we've got a big-time matchup. Usually has a lot more importance, but because of FSU's poor play this year, not so much, but still a big game. Clemson at Florida State. Like I said, FSU has kind of underperformed so far this year. Clemson still undefeated, had the scare against NC State, held on against Louisville. So neither of these teams are looking quite to the level they have been in the past.
And Clemson's coming off of a bye week, much needed after that scare against NC State at home. But they're playing a good Florida State team. Florida State's defense has not been very good so far, but they played a lot of the best offenses in the country. You look at North Carolina, Louisville, Ole Miss, South Florida, and so they've really played against some great competition, and it's tough to be good whenever you're playing against the best week in and week out. But Clemson is they have too much star power, a real Heisman contender in Deshaun Watson, and a defense that is always going to get pressure on your quarterback. And whenever you have a true freshman in DeAndre Francois getting pressure, that's never going to be a pretty sight. So I think Clemson's going to pull out the victory, but it'll be closer than the experts think.
Yeah, I agree that Clemson's going to win. I do think it is going to be as wide a margin as the experts think. I'm not really sure what the experts are saying, but I'm going to say they're going to win by a few touchdowns. Florida State has not looked that good. They struggled. They came back to beat Ole Miss, but they struggled heavily against them. They lost to North Carolina, which is a decent team, but if you want to be an elite team, those are the games you've got to win. Got clobbered against Louisville. I think Clemson goes down and takes care of business, even though they haven't been performing up to their standards they've set for themselves. I think maybe this is the game they use to jumpstart their season and really power through to the end. Now for our last game we're going to preview, let's look at a team that is really flying under the radar, even more so than Nebraska, and this is Boise State. They're undefeated as well. They're playing at Wyoming this week. Jordan, is it possible? We kind of entertained the thought last week with Western Michigan over against Eastern Michigan. If Western Michigan did win that game we talked about. But if Boise State wins out, do they have a shot at the playoff?
Yeah, I definitely think they have a shot at the playoff if they win out. You're going to have multiple one-loss teams. maybe like one or two undefeateds left. Probably just one undefeated left, because if you have one undefeated, then you'll get Louisville and Ohio State. And then Boise State can definitely, they'll be in the conversation. I don't think it's likely that they get put in the playoff. They've played against some good teams. They beat a Washington State team that's really come along. Utah State, that's always a 7-5, 6-6 team, just a decent team to play against. And then BYU, who's competed against everyone they've played against very well. They haven't been able to pull out the victories, but they've competed. But I don't want to talk about Boise State's chances. I think they're going to lose this weekend at Wyoming.
Wow.
Yeah, they're playing a really good team. They're flying under the radar at 5-2, 3-0 in conference. And this game is it'll dictate who controls their destiny for the rest of the season. And I think Wyoming has a great shot.
Wow, that is a bold proclamation. You heard it here first, folks. The Wyoming Cowboys over the Boise State Broncos. I'll definitely disagree with you on this. I think Boise State wins, continues their perfect season. But yeah, like you said, I think it's unlikely. They do have a chance, albeit a small chance, to make the playoff. But everybody listening to this podcast, everybody should be on Team Chaos. Hashtag Team Chaos. Just root for everybody to lose every week, so we can get an Eastern Michigan or Western Michigan versus Boise State national title game.
And I might add something to what I said. I think Wyoming has a great shot. I wouldn't go so far to lock my pick in at this point. I would pick them right now, but I can't lock it in for the end of the week. I'm gonna have to see if any injuries develop, just because Wyoming, my reason for picking Wyoming is that they just have a great balance on offense, and then their defense has been pretty bad, allowing a lot of passing yards. And against Brett Rippon, that's not gonna be good if they don't shore up their pass defense. But they're averaging 0.1 more yards per game, which is just a huge difference. 0.1. No, but in all seriousness, I think Wyoming is ready to upset this Boise State team. They haven't performed very well lately, only winning by 5 against Colorado State, only winning by 1 against BYU. And they're traveling to a Wyoming team that I'm sure they're underestimating. So they should definitely be on upset alert. I would go ahead and sound that siren right now. It's going to be closer than the experts think, and as of right now, I would pick Wyoming outright. But we'll see if any injuries develop or what stories develop as the week wears on.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, be sure you're taking notes, because that is how you pivot away and give yourself some room to switch your pick later on.
Well, I had to, just in case anything happens, but right now for sure, I think Wyoming is going to pull off the upset, just because Boise State is looking ahead to that Air Force game late in the season. It's far away, but you know that the rest of the games from here on out are not looking too challenging, and this is the one team that is a decent underdog, but I think can pull out a win.
Mm-hmm. Well, that concludes our preview portion of this week's podcast. Let's jump into the listener questions now. We've got 2 this week, so more than we had last week.
An infinite percentage more than we had last week.
Let's go with the first one here. This Steve King, at Steve K. King, asks, will the Oklahoma State students show up and stay for the game against top 10 West Virginia? Now I'll go ahead and go first on this. We've talked about it a little bit before, but attendance at OSU games has been an issue so far this year. Attendance itself is down, and also many fans and students especially are leaving sometimes halfway through the game, occasionally even before that, to go back out to the tailgates, to the parking lots. Fan attendance and retention has been an issue. Everybody's been waiting and waiting till we got the big marquee game. Unfortunately, it's at 11 a.m., which is not going to help matters, and it's homecoming. And if you don't know, on homecoming, all the Greek life. They put a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort into these homecoming decks, which are amazing and beautiful, but they also have a notorious reputation of going to the first half of the game and then leaving right at halftime and leaving half the student section empty and leaving about 5,000 empty metal bleachers sitting right there. So I expect that will happen again. That usually doesn't change that doesn't change based on who we're playing or year by year. It always happens. On the whole, I think student retention will be better. I think if we had a night game instead, one at 7 p.m., Boone Pickens would be rocking throughout the entire game, but we've unfortunately been dealt this another 11 a.m. kickoff. We just need to do what OU did a few years ago and just tell the networks we refuse to play at 11 a.m. It worked for them, so maybe it would work for us.
Yeah, just to hit on that tradition, that might be the dumbest tradition ever. That those students paid to get into the games, and they're essentially losing half of their money because they're idiots leaving the game early. I'm just shocked that they would leave early in games where they're leading, in games where they're down, in games where it's close. They leave, and that's embarrassing. And I hope that the rest of the Oklahoma State student section is able to address that problem and get the Greeks to stay. But like you said, attendance has been down as a whole, and this 11 o'clock kickoff doesn't help very much. But I think people, not the Greeks, but I think everyone else will understand the importance of this game and the importance of bringing a top 10 team to your house. And I think most people will stay for the whole game. I guess pending how the game goes. I think most people stay for the whole game. And aside from the Greeks, I think some will probably stay. But like you said, it is homecoming weekend, and I'm sure that they're going to want to do other things instead of staying at the game. So it's sad that they don't want to, but it's a tradition nonetheless. And hopefully someone comes along and creates a new one where they stay for the whole game and honor the work that the players have been putting in all week.
Yeah, I would hope so too, because we will definitely need the crowd to help out the team this weekend. We're playing a top 10 opponent in West Virginia. Now, our second listener question comes from @Beth Lunderman. She asks, what does Arkansas showing this past weekend say about how they might finish up the year against other ranked opponents?
Yeah, our two ranked opponents that are left are LSU and Florida. And I would be very optimistic had these two teams not been primarily rushing-oriented teams. And Bielema is going to have to get in the defensive scheming room and take over a little bit whenever Rob Smith says something. I hope that he speaks over him and he lets him know that some of the things that he's doing are just not smart. He's not coaching our defensive line to keep contained. Our secondary is not doing too bad. They've protected the deep ball fairly well. A lot of times we give a big cushion, which leaves opportunities for short routes, but the real concern is in the running game, and I'm hoping that they're able to fix that. But I think those teams, or those two games, we're probably going to be underdogs in both. With the way that Edo has turned around LSU and just Florida's consistency on defense and our inability to run the ball against great defenses. And then if Austin Allen is ruled out against them, it's a foregone conclusion that we'll lose that game. But we'll definitely be bowl eligible, and that's something to look forward to as we play a Mississippi State team and a Missouri team on the road. I think we'll collect both of those wins, and at worst in the season 7-5. At best, I think we can win both of those games, but there's going to have to be a game that's coached as well as it was against Ole Miss.
Yeah, and like you said, it's always great to go bowling. You always want to have your team go into a bowl game at the very least. That's great for the fans. great for the players to go out, get some free stuff from the sponsors of the bowl games, get some exposure on national television. But I do think they've got a tough end of the season. LSU under Coach O, they'll be a tough out. If they come out like they did against Auburn, there's a potential they may not win any of the rest of their games. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it may well be a possibility.
Yeah, I don't see them dropping the Missouri and the Mississippi State games, arguably the two worst teams in the SEC at this point. But I do think that the first two we're definitely going to be underdogs. And I guess going on the road, it could be tough playing in Starkville or playing in Columbia. But I see two victories there. And if I had to say now, I think based on our performance last week, we'll probably lose against Florida and LSU.
Yep. Well, that concludes our part 2 of the podcast this week. Thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate it. Special thanks once again to our editor, Stephen Pangestu, for producing the podcast this week. We really appreciate all the work you put in. Jordan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, the whole purpose of our podcast is to just have a way for us to interact with you guys, and our way that we chose is through sports. And so if you're interested in sports or you know people that are, we want you to be asking questions and interacting with us. We love answering the questions. We hope that we continue to get more week after week. And we actually had another fan answer a question as we were answering that question on the recording. Scott King answered Steve's question as we were answering it. So we like the participation from those that are continually posting questions, but we would like others to reach out and ask some questions as well.
Well said. We like you said, appreciate everybody listening. Be sure to get your questions in for next week. But as always, thanks for listening.
Have a good one.